For 3 decades, Johnny Carson ruled late night as the master of cool. Perfect suit, perfect timing, perfect control. But live television doesn't care about control. Some nights spun into chaos. Others blew up completely. What you're about to see isn't polished comedy. It's the 16 times Johnny Carson got caught off guard, ambushed by laughter, shaken by raw emotion, or blindsided by disasters no one could predict. These are the unscripted moments that showed viewers the real man behind the legend. The times when the mask finally slipped, and Johnny couldn't hide his reaction. And as wild as they all are, one in particular stood out. Number 8. Didn't just get people talking. It sparked an avalanche of viewer mail and became one of the most controversial moments in Tonight Show history. But before we get there, let's start with the infamous tomahawk throw that left Carson laughing harder than he ever had on live TV. It was supposed to be simple, a demonstration of frontier skill from actor Ed Ames, then famous for playing Mingo. A wooden silhouette rolled out. Ames took aim. The tomahawk left his hand, tumbling end over end with perfect accuracy, and planted itself dead center in the target's crotch. The audience gasped, then howled. Johnny didn't just laugh, he broke. He bent at the waist, clutching the desk, his breath hitching in soundless spasms before the joke finally found speech. The line he eventually squeezed out was so clean, so precisely wrong, that it detonated the room twice. For once, the king of timing wasn't orchestrating the moment. He was being swept away by it, proof that the best punchlines sometimes happen to you, not because of you. Next, a broken keepsake, a wounded ego, and a revenge mission across the studio lot. When Don Rickles guest hosted, he accidentally smashed the neat little cigarette box on Carson's desk, an object Johnny treated like part of the set's bones. The next night, with Johnny back in the chair, the damage became a bit, and then, a quest. During a break, Carson realized Rickles was taping his sitcom just yards away. He stood up, grabbed a camera crew, and marched across the lot mid-show. The sitcom audience froze as Johnny barged onto their set like a sheriff into a saloon, waving the broken box and demanding answers. Rickles flailed. Johnny toyed. The audience roared. What made it stick wasn't anger. It was affection. Johnny only did that to people he trusted enough to tease in public. Television thrives on surprise. Carson understood that better than anyone, and that night, he started his own. Next, the night the most controlled man in TV didn't hold back the tears. Near the end of 30 years, goodbyes arrived, whether he wanted them or not. Bette Midler settled into the guest chair with all her usual mischief, then asked for the band. The song wasn't bombast. It was a last call, hymn, soft, smoky, intimate. One for my baby, and one more for the road. The camera found Carson's eyes just as they brimmed. He didn't crack a joke to deflect it. He let the wave hit, and he let us see him ride it. When the final note settled, Johnny said what every performer says only when they mean it. I can't top that. It wasn't a performance anymore. It was a farewell in the plain language of feeling, and it turned America's favorite mask into a window. Next, a tiny primate, a perfect haircut, and a host trying not to move an inch. Animal segments were always booby-trapped with chance. On this night, a capuchin decided Carson's carefully arranged hair looked like a mountaintop. It hopped from handler to host and climbed straight onto his head. Johnny froze, eyes forward, every muscle pretending this was normal. Laughter thickened the air. When the monkey finally returned to its handler, Carson's hair resembled an electrical accident. He adjusted a cuff, paused, offered one cool, dry line that crushed the room. The spell broke. The host was back, but for a priceless minute, even his hair was a punchline. Next, the magician who pulled a telephone from a place where telephones do not belong. Steve Martin walked in promising magic and delivered something stranger. A masterclass in committed nonsense. Eggs from the fly. A salt shaker. A ringing phone. A tiny waving hand. The trick wasn't just the props, it was the poker-faced conviction that made the impossible look mundane. Johnny started as the straight man, then slipped into helpless laughter as the routine piled choice on choice, each more ridiculous than the last. For a host who'd seen every kind of act, surprise was a rare luxury. Steve gave him that gift. For a few minutes, Carson didn't steer the show. He sat among us and just enjoyed it. Next, a guest who couldn't be steered by anyone. Some guests bring stories. Robin Williams brought weather pressure systems of ideas that formed, collided, and rained voices, characters, gestures, and references no writer's room could map. He appeared to promote a movie, and instead, detonated pure improvisation. Carson didn't fight it. He leaned back and let Robin run, smiling like a man holding a kite in a gale. The genius of the moment wasn't chaos, it was trust. Johnny trusted that the audience would recognize the rare electricity of a performer operating at speed, and that his job wasn't to interrupt, but to witness. That choice turned an interview into controlled anarchy that kept viewers leaning forward because anything could happen, and with Robin, it often did. Next, a roast so risky Johnny watched the guest's face more than the crowd. Frank Sinatra wasn't just famous, he was a weather vane for power. Rickles didn't bring kid gloves, he brought a flamethrower. He ribbed Sinatra like a friend at a nightclub, kneecapping the myth in front of an America that half expected thunder for the disrespect. Carson's eyes flicked from Rickles to Sinatra, tracking the line. And then Sinatra laughed. Not politely, fully. The room exhaled. In that laugh lived the whole reason late night worked. A stage safe enough to puncture image without losing respect. Johnny didn't steer the bit, he tended it, making sure the heat stayed on the joke and never the man. Next, the line at number 8 that turned mailrooms into blizzards. Dolly Parton glowed with high-octane charm, and she was always game to poke fun at herself. Johnny made a bold, highly flirtatious quip that lit the audience like a fuse half-howls, half-sharp breaths. Dolly, unflappable, laughed and played along, but the aftershock was real. Viewers argued about it for weeks. Was it refreshing honesty or a line crossed on national television? The clip became a cultural bookmark, a snapshot of shifting standards, and the tightrope every host walks between candor and respect. Carson didn't disown the moment, he learned from it. And the show rolled on, a little wiser about the weather outside the studio walls. Next, a legend returns with old jokes, and Johnny's patience gets tested on camera. Bob Hope once defined topical jokes like a jazz player defines swing, but time blunts even the sharpest instrument. In later visits, Hope leaned on cards, on muscle memory, on material that felt older than the news it referenced. The audience smiled, the laughs thinned. You could watch Johnny slip into caretaker mode, polite, supportive, trying to cup the flame with his hands. That look between him and Ed McMahon, the quick tie loosen. The flick of the eye told the inside story. Respect met reality. The segment ended, as all things do, with a handshake and gratitude. But tucked inside that moment was a lesson. Comedy lives in the present, and no one, not even the greats, can stay there forever. Next, a poem about a dog lands harder than any punchline. Jimmy Stewart didn't bring a bit. He brought the memory of a best friend with 4 legs. He read softly, haltingly, like each word had to be earned. The poem began like a simple tribute and unspooled into absence, the kind you feel in the hand you still reach out without thinking. Johnny's face did what it rarely did: nothing. He didn't deflect. He didn't speed to a commercial. He sat still and let TV be a place where grief could breathe for a minute. When Stewart finished, there was no need for wit. The silence did the talking. In a house built for laughter, they let tenderness take the stage and left the audience grateful for it. Next, from tears to terror, a reptile forgets the script. Joan Embry brought a Burmese python and a plan. The plan did not include the snake deciding desks or suggestions. It slid toward Carson with the terrible, fluid purpose only large reptiles possess. Johnny moved like a man who has discovered new muscle groups for the express purpose of getting distance. The audience howled. He eventually returned to the chair and, with surgical calm, delivered one perfect line about needing to check his suit. If you ever wanted to see the polished host become every person who's ever jumped at a garden hose, This was your clip. Panic, joke, reset. Show saved. Next, a wordsmith sneaks past the guardrail and the host lets it ride. George Carlin liked testing fences. On a night when the network standards loomed like a librarian at last call, he slipped in a sideways barb language, just clean enough to pass, just sharp enough to land. Johnny caught it instantly. He didn't underline it or scold it. He let the faintest grin bloom, the kind that tells an audience, yes, you heard what you think you heard, and yes, the world will keep spinning. The joy wasn't in breaking rules. It was in dancing so close to the line that the line had to laugh too. Next, a rat packer pretends he's had one too many, and the host plays the perfect straight man. Dean Martin's just a little lit persona was a lacquer so smooth people forgot it was polish. On a night when the stumble looked a touch wobblier and the shrug even looser, Carson made the smartest move a host can make. He stopped competing with the bit. He fed Dean gentle setups and let the persona do what it was built to do, win the room with shameless ease. The magic of it wasn't whether Dean was acting. It was the uncertainty. The audience leaned in to decide for themselves. Ambiguity did its ancient work. Next, a monologue gets heckled by the next guest. The Tonight Show had a shape. Monologue first, then ride the rails. Don Rickles decided to scatter those rails. He heckled from offstage, loud enough that the home audience could smell the grin. Carson stopped mid-joke, turned toward the curtain, and called Rickles out early. The monologue weeks of tiny rewrites and nightly polish was abandoned without a funeral. Why? Because a live spark is always better than a stored battery. Johnny knew the job wasn't to protect the plan. It was to promote the most interesting thing happening right now. And right now, it was a friendly ambush. Next, one man becomes many and leaves a host doubled over. Conversation drifted toward great entertainers and, without a breath, Sammy Davis Jr. morphed. His face tightened into Jimmy Stewart's worried nobility, then loosened into Jerry Lewis's elastic chaos, then cooled into Sinatra's satin glare. No props, no cuts. Just a man turning dials inside himself until another voice came out. Carson laughed, the dangerous laugh, the kind that steals oxygen and composure. For a host who prized craft, it was a front-row seat to pure technique, a reminder that sometimes talent isn't an opinion, it's an undeniable fact. Next, an action star pranks a talk show, and the host answers in fluent nonsense. Arnold sat. Johnny asked the soft-pitch first question, and out came a thoughtful, complete answer, entirely in German. The crowd blinked. Johnny didn't. He nodded gravely and replied in expert gibberish, syllables so confidently senseless the audience finally broke. Arnold kept it up just long enough for Carson's fake fluency to become the joke, then switched to English and confessed the bit. The segment worked because Johnny understood the sacred rule. If a prank lands in your lap, make it a duet. He didn't demand control back. He found the fun in letting it go. Next. So what do these 16 wild moments prove about the king of late night? Carson's genius was never just in the punchlines. It was in his instincts when the bridge washed out mid-crossing. Laugh when the axe throw goes wrong. Listen when a poem cracks the room in half. Step back when Robin's storm rolls in. Step forward when a guest needs a steady hand. Steal a camera and crash a taping when the joke's better across the lot. The reason these clips live forever isn't nostalgia. It's recognition. We watch the most prepared man in television navigate the one thing you can't prepare for. The present moment. He guarded his privacy, wore composure like a suit, and then at precisely the right times set both aside. A laugh that wouldn't stop. A song that ended him. A snake that relocated his soul to the rafters. A flirtation that hit debate speed. A roast that could have curdled but didn't. A prank that became a partnership. Across 30 years, the lesson repeated. Audiences don't just love polish, they love truth. Show them the real twitch of fear, the real spark of joy, the real tear that refuses to wait, and they'll follow you anywhere. Johnny did. And that's why the most controlled host in America is remembered for the nights he surrendered control and turned live television into something alive. If you loved this deep dive into Carson's wildest nights, there are a dozen more moments hiding in the archives. Some are messy, some are tender. All of them prove that the magic of late night never lived on the cue cards. It lived in the seconds no one could plan. Subscribe for the next countdown and tell us which moment you want exposed next. Because the best stories aren't the ones that stayed on script, they're the ones that escaped.